Sharma, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I pay tribute to the member for bringing this, and indeed not simply the eloquence with which he's put forward the argument, but the very balanced nature. I think it wasn't simply the tenor in which he used, but the fact that this does unite the chamber, that there is almost a manifest injustice here. There is little that has not increased since 2011, and indeed in terms of political, there's been a significant number of elections, never mind changes in office. And it's obviously, as the member correctly pointed out, not simply the voluntary sector, but it goes into those who are employed, not simply those who are employed by the council, but those indeed who are self-employed, because the traditional white van man, but indeed in other occupations, also requires to seek some recompense for the mileage that they're required to do to be able to carry out their trade, their services, or whatever. It is a matter I've been pursuing locally. I know it has often been put forward that there can be local settlements, but as the member quite correctly pointed out, the template tends to be HMRC. There are implications in terms of taxation if you don't do it. And indeed, even whilst I've had negotiations and discussions with officials, it's very difficult to get political sign-off, so it's one thing for officials to be persuaded. There are members here, I know, who were at the meeting held by Unison along with the RAC Foundation. Now, there may be some on some side of the chamber who would view Unison as having a particular vested interest. I don't think that can be said about the RAC Foundation. They are an organisation established for a particular... By all means.
I too was at the Unison organised meeting, and I can only say positive things about the engagement that they've had with members right across the House. And if I could just put on the record my thanks to Anna Burley from Unison for the report that she so ably prepared in respect of this.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sitting with a copy of the report myself, and the member's quite correct. There were people from a variety of parties there. And as I say, the RAC Foundation is not there in a political capacity. It went there, it looked at it, and I think Unison did the right thing in doing it in conjunction with them. It gives it ballast, it gives it legitimacy, because the RAC, along with the AA, are specialists in motoring matters, and they have come to the conclusion that clearly 63p, together with some form of system, is in fact it's necessary. On a local basis, I face all the difficulties that the member moving the motion very ably has also pointed out. East Lothian isn't the biggest constituency. It's not the size of some of those in the Highlands of Scotland, but it's still significant, running along the length of the A1 from Musselburgh all the way to the villages before you hit the Scottish borders. That's in excess of 60 miles. Although the principal town tends to be Harrington, the community hospital is hubbed there, the council is based there, you're unable to work without going into the other towns that are equally jealous of their own independence, seek to retain their own facilities, whether it's those on the coast such as Dunbar, where I live, or North Berwick, or inland with Tranent or elsewhere, never mind the small villages. So whether you're doing voluntary work, whether you're working for the council, whether you're carrying out a trade, you cannot carry out your job without running up a significant mileage. And it's not simply those doing jobs such as care. I know those who are at senior positions and health visitors who are actually struggling financially because, as with others, they've seen their mortgage go up, they're having to keep the roof above their head, and yet it's costing them to work because the daily mileage rate that they carry out is not being recompensed. They're having to have a car not simply to carry out their job, but they're thereafter having to pay additional costs simply to carry out their job on behalf of their employer. So that's why, as I say, I think this has to be taken on board. And the member, quite correctly in moving it, pointed out that we shouldn't just seek to remedy it once and then have to look at it year after. It would be worthwhile to enter into a position where this could be index-linked. But we also have to bear in mind, and the member who was in attendance will also be aware, that that was made quite clear by workers, because it's not simply the cost of fuel, and the 145 resonates with what Asda's currently charging in Dunbar. But let's remember that when this is paid by employers, it's also meant to be recompensing you for the wear and tear upon your car. It's also meant to be recompensing you for the insurance. And I thought one of the most significant things in the RAC Foundation was that actually fuel costs had increased at the lowest rate. Insurance, as I remember, had increased at the highest rate, but the other factors had also increased. So it's not simply that you're having to pay for your fuel, whether it's petrol or diesel, you're actually having to pay the car costs that are necessary for your work and that your employer expects you, because you cannot do that job, certainly in my location, but it's the same whether it's urban or rural. So it's for that reason that we require to have this amendment. There is, as I say, I think, political buy-in across the chamber. There is a recognition, not just simply from trade unions, but from motoring organisations, that this is long past its sell-die date. It's quite clear from what others have said that it's not simply people are struggling to be able to do their work and be required to get people into the labour market, as there's statements being made elsewhere in this building on that very subject. People have to be able to be recompensed for their work, not be paying out their own pocket to do their job, and we require, by all means.
Making a brilliant and eloquent speech about this issue, which affects one of my constituents, and many of my Livingston constituents have signed the petition, but one of my constituents, who's a housing officer, was struggling to get by before the cost of living crisis on the mileage allowance. And does he share my concerns that whether it's NHS staff, public sector staff, if they can't get by on the mileage rate that's being offered, they will go elsewhere, and we are already struggling to keep people in those vital roles?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the issue was first raised with me by the Chief Executive of East Lothian Council because they're struggling to retain staff, and staff are necessary. So I'll simply finish up there, Mr Chair. It does seem to me that we have buy-in across the chamber. We have buy-in, I think, in the community, as shown by Unison and the RAC Foundation. This is something about remedying a wrong. 2011 is long time ago politically, never mind in terms of costs. And on that basis, I do hope that the Minister can come round to addressing not simply the rate, but indeed let's make sure that we don't have this continuing on a yearly basis and that we sort out some annualised system.
Peter Aldous, please.